Uncle? Why did Mommy leave me? Her tiny voice trembled in the frozen darkness. A little girl abandoned in the heart of a winter storm. No coat, no shoes, no explanation. She thought no one would come. She thought she would disappear beneath the falling snow. But fate placed a U.S. Marine on that same lonely road, a man who had survived war, yet could not ignore the cry of a child. The moment he lifted her into his arms, secrets buried for years began to surface, revealing a truth powerful enough to shake the entire town of Frost Hollow. Before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching. Leave your city in the comments. And if you believe God sends miracles through ordinary people, subscribe and watch until the end. This story will stay with you long after the snow melts. Winter dusk smothered Frost Hollow under a roaring whiteout, the wind carving through Highway 7 like a living blade. Sergeant Cole Harrington tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the pickup truck groaned against the rising wind. At 36, Cole carried the build and presence of a Marine shaped by 2 decades of discipline, broad-shouldered, ruggedly handsome in a worn, weather-beaten way, jawline sharp but softened by a dark stubble, eyebrows often drawn in quiet vigilance. His skin had the bronze tone of a man used to harsh climates, though now it was flushed by the sting of winter. His black hair, kept in a tight regulation cut even years after leaving active duty, dusted with snow that had blown in when he climbed into the truck back at the veteran relief station. He had the posture of someone who still slept lightly, muscles permanently conditioned to react before thought. Beside him sat Ranger, his 6-year-old German Shepherd K9 partner from his last deployment. The dog had a powerful, well-muscled frame, with amber gold fur streaked with deeper charcoal down the spine. Ranger's ears stood sharp and alert, and his dark eyes carried the keen, intelligent spark of a creature who had once sniffed out explosives, tracked wounded Marines, and slept beside Cole through the worst nights of his life. Even in retirement, Ranger moved with a soldier's precision, cautious but gentle, especially with those smaller or weaker. Cole had picked up donated blankets from the relief station and was heading home, thinking of the warmth waiting in his cabin. Elena's hands wrapped around a mug of tea, the cedar smell of the wood stove, and Ranger's spot by the rug. It was a thought that always soothed him. Because the truth, the part he told no one but whispered to the dog on long nights, was that leaving the Marines had not been the peaceful homecoming he'd imagined. Something about civilian life felt too slow, too quiet, too fragile, and the ghosts of the battlefield followed him into sleep. But tonight's storm forced even those ghosts aside. Ranger suddenly rose to his feet, claws clicking on the dashboard, ears snapping forward. Cole frowned. "What is it, buddy?" Ranger let out a low, sharp growl, a warning he only used when something was terribly wrong. Cole leaned forward, squinting through the spiraling snow. Visibility was nearly zero, the headlights swallowed by the blizzard's furious inhale. The truck crawled forward another yard. Then Cole slammed the brakes. A tiny shape appeared in the center of the road. At first it looked like a snow-covered bundle, but then it moved, shivering so violently it rocked. A child. Cole's heart lurched painfully against his ribs. "You've got to be kidding me." He flung open the door, the wind hitting with a force that stole breath. Snow bit his face like needles as he raced toward the small figure curled on the icy asphalt. She was no more than 4 years old, a little girl with tangled dark brown hair, stiff with ice crystals. Her skin was pale gray, lips nearly blue, tiny hands curled into shaking fists against her chest. She wore only a thin, ripped sweater, pink once, now dulled and torn, and her bare feet were purple from the cold. She looked like she had been sitting there for hours. Cole dropped to his knees. "Hey, sweetheart. Hey, I've got you." The girl blinked up at him, tears frozen on her lashes. Her voice came out cracked, barely audible under the storm. Mommy told me to sit here and wait for her, but she didn't come back. She didn't come back." Her words struck Cole like a fist to the gut. In all his years of seeing cruelty on battlefields, in broken homes, in towns ravaged by poverty, nothing prepared him for the sight of a child abandoned in a snowstorm. "No," he whispered, already shrugging off his heavy Marine-issue winter coat. "No one should ever leave a child out here." He wrapped her in the coat, lifting her gently. She weighed almost nothing, a frightening nothing, as though the cold had hollowed her out. Ranger circled them, whining anxiously, brushing his warm body against the girl to share heat. She weakly touched his fur, fingers trembling. Cole hurried her into the truck, blasting the heater. The girl curled into the coat, eyes fluttering half-closed. "What's your name?" he asked softly, checking her pulse and rubbing her hands to warm them. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" "Arya," she whispered. "Arya, that's a beautiful name." Cole swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm Cole, and that's Ranger. We're going to help you, okay?" She nodded faintly, but her eyes slid shut. Panic stabbed him. No, don't fall asleep. Stay with me." He tapped her cheek lightly. Ranger nudged her side with a soft paw. Arya stirred. Barely. Cole drove faster than he should have through the storm, tires skidding on ice but his hands steady with the confidence of a man who had driven armored vehicles under fire. His mind raced. Why was she here? Why barefoot? Why abandoned? Why lying in the middle of a highway where she could have died 10 different ways in one night? And where was her mother? By the time Cole reached his cabin, his pulse was hammering. The small wooden home sat under a thick blanket of snow, warm orange light glowing through the window. Elena must have already lit the stove. Elena Harrington was 34, slender with an elegant height and soft chestnut hair usually tied in a loose bun. She had gentle gray-blue eyes, the kind that saw every hurt even when unspoken. Her face, naturally delicate, carried a subtle sadness. 10 years of infertility had left invisible scars, but also a fierce kindness for any child who crossed her path. Elena opened the door just as Cole stepped onto the porch, Arya in his arms. "Oh my God," she gasped, hands flying to her mouth. "Cole, what happened? Who is that?" "She was in the road," Cole said, breath fogging. "Barefoot, freezing, abandoned. Elena, she's ice cold." Elena was already reaching for blankets. "Bring her in, quickly." Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and warm bread. The wood stove crackled, filling the room with comforting heat. Elena layered Arya in blankets while Cole warmed water and Ranger lay pressed against the girl's legs, radiating warmth. After 30 minutes, Arya's color began to return, her trembling eased. Then she whispered, voice raw, "Mommy told me, sit on the road and wait." But she drove away. I waited and waited. Elena went still. Cole clenched his fists. "That wasn't your fault," he said gently. "Do you hear me, Arya? None of this is your fault." Her small fingers tightened around his sleeve. The storm howled louder outside, rattling the windows. Arya's gaze drifted, frightened, as though the blizzard itself was a reminder of what she'd been left in. Cole and Elena exchanged a look, one that said everything without speaking. A decision had already been made in both their hearts. This child was not going back into the cold. Later that night, Arya slept curled against Ranger's side, wrapped in blankets. For the first time since they found her, she breathed deeply and peacefully. Cole stood by the bedroom doorway, watching her. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, but beneath it was something else, something warm. A sense of purpose he hadn't felt since the Marines. Elena slipped her hand into his. "She's safe now," she whispered. "For tonight," Cole murmured. "But Elena, what kind of person leaves their child in a storm?" Elena swallowed, unable to answer. Outside, the wind screamed across the frozen pines, and somewhere out there, Cole knew, Arya's mother, whoever she was, still existed. He had a sudden uneasy sense that this night was only the beginning, and then, just as he turned away, Ranger lifted his head sharply, ears pricked, eyes locked on the window, as if sensing something approaching through the snow. The storm did not lift in the days that followed. Frost Hollow sank deeper into a white silence so heavy it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Snow piled against windows, weighed down rooftops, blurred the edges of the town until everything outside Cole Harrington's cabin seemed suspended in a dream of endless winter. Inside, however, warmth slowly returned, first through the crackling wood stove, then through the gentle rhythms of daily life, and finally through the quiet presence of the little girl who had nearly died in the storm. Arya blossomed in ways that broke and healed Cole all at once. On the first morning she woke without shaking. She ate slowly but steadily. Her small hands, still bandaged from the frostbite, gripping the spoon with careful determination. By the third morning, she finished her oatmeal and after a hesitant moment whispered, "Thank you, Mama Elena." Elena, who had been stirring soup at the counter, froze mid-motion. Her eyes, soft gray blue with a constant undertone of sadness, instantly glistened. She knelt beside Arya, embracing her with a gentleness that came from years of yearning for a child she thought she would never have. Arya's room had once been a storage space, but Elena cleaned it out in a day, transforming it into a tiny sanctuary filled with quilts, old picture books, and a small dresser painted pale blue. Ranger often lay curled at the foot of her bed, keeping watch with the vigilance of a guardian spirit. The dog's warmth soothed Arya's nightmares, and Cole caught her whispering secrets into Ranger's fur on more than one evening, as though trusting him with the parts of her heart still too fragile to give away freely. Elena introduced Arya to embroidery one evening when the snow hit the windows with a beat like quiet drums. Her hands, long and elegant, guided Arya's tiny fingers as they stitched white thread into the outline of a snowflake. Arya's concentration was fierce, tongue poking out slightly, brows furrowed, and when the snowflake finally took shape, she giggled, the sound brightening the dim cabin more than any lamp could. Cole taught her other things, how to stack firewood, how to wrap a scarf properly, how to brush Ranger's thick coat while checking for burrs or ice. The more time he spent with her, the more he felt the slow, startling shift inside himself. He'd always assumed fatherhood wasn't meant for men like him, men shaped by violence and discipline, men who carried invisible wounds that sleep could never fully erase. But when Arya reached for his hand during a loud gust of wind, or when she proudly showed him the snowflakes she stitched, or when she leaned against him sleepily during story time, a tenderness unfolded inside him that he hadn't known existed. She started calling him Uncle Cole on the fourth day. It sent a shock through him, warm, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. He didn't correct her. Couldn't. The days settled into a gentle routine, and for a moment, just a moment, it seemed that the storm outside had no power over the warmth building within their home. But Frost Hollow was a town where peace rarely lasted long. One morning, as Cole finished splitting logs behind the cabin, Ranger suddenly stiffened. His tail rose, fur bristling along his spine, a dangerous low rumble vibrating in his chest. Cole dropped the axe immediately. Ranger never reacted like that without good reason. Elena's voice came from inside. "Cole? Something's happening." Cole rounded the corner, snow crunching sharply beneath his boots. On the front porch stood a woman so disheveled she looked like she had crawled out of the storm itself. Her clothes were soaked through. Her hair, long, dark, and tangled, hung limp against her gaunt cheeks. She looked to be in her early 30s, though hardship had carved exhaustion into her features. Her brown eyes, bloodshot and wild, darted between Elena and the door, as though searching for something she had already lost. Behind her stood a man, taller, broader, and infinitely more dangerous in the way he carried himself. He wore a threadbare winter coat stained at the collar, and his unshaven jaw was peppered with coarse, uneven stubble. His face was sharp, sunken in the cheeks, but what made Cole tense immediately was the man's eyes, reddened, unfocused, yet burning with a restless aggression. The kind of eyes Cole had seen on men who drank too much, fought too much, or believed the world owed them some elusive debt. The man reeked of alcohol. Even from the porch, Cole could smell it drifting on the cold air. "Cole," Elena said quietly, stepping backward, instinctively putting herself between Arya and the doorframe. "They're asking for the girl." Cole's heart dropped. The woman took a shaky step forward. I'm Mara," she stammered. Her voice cracked with exhaustion and something darker, fear or guilt. "I'm here for my daughter. I'm here for Arya." Arya, who had been peeking from behind Elena's skirt, froze, her tiny fingers curling desperately into the fabric. Ranger positioned himself between the child and the strangers, teeth baring ever so slightly. The man stepped forward, swaying just a little. "You heard her? The kid's ours. Hand her over." Cole's body went ice still, though not from the cold. The Marine in him, the part trained to assess threats instantly, flared awake. He took in the man's posture, the twitch in his jaw, the red-rimmed eyes, the clenching fist in his coat pocket. This was not a man in control of himself. "Arya doesn't want to go with you," Cole said carefully, voice low but firm. "She's terrified." "She's a child," Mara cried, voice cracking. "She doesn't know what she wants." Arya let out a sharp sob and buried her face in Elena's coat. "Please don't make me go, Mama Elena. Please don't." Elena's breath hitched at the title, but she held Arya tighter. Cole stepped forward, placing himself squarely between the strangers and his family. "Nobody is taking her anywhere until we understand what happened," he said. "You left her in a snowstorm, barefoot." Mara flinched, guilt splashing across her face, but before she could speak, the man answered instead, voice slurring with anger. "She's ours," he growled, "and you don't get to tell us what to do with what's ours." Ranger's growl deepened, hackles rising like a ridge of spines. Cole's jaw clenched. He couldn't punch this man, couldn't drag him off the porch, not yet. The law was a line he had learned to respect, even when his instincts begged him to cross it. But if the man made one wrong move... "Mara," Elena said softly, trying to reach the woman beneath the fear. "Arya was freezing to death. How could you leave her like that?" Mara's eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean to. Cade was angry. We fought. I panicked. I just needed a moment to think." "You left her in a blizzard," Cole snapped, unable to hold it in. "A moment like that can kill a child." Cade, so that was his name, snorted. "She's fine. Ain't she breathing?" Cole's fists tightened. He had known men like this overseas, men who used intimidation like language, who pushed their weight around because it was the only thing they had ever been taught. Arya trembled harder. "Cade," Mara whispered, tugging weakly at his sleeve. "Please, stop." He jerked his arm away. "We're taking the kid. End of story." Cole stepped off the porch, boots digging into fresh snow, his body a wall of quiet steel. His voice cut through the wind. "No one is taking Arya," he said, "especially not while she's standing there shaking." Cade's lip curled. "And what'll you do, soldier boy?" Before Cole could answer, and before the situation could explode, Ranger suddenly lunged forward with a ferocious snarl, stopping inches short of Cade's leg, his body taut with protective fury. Cade stumbled back, startled, almost slipping on the icy steps. "Call off your mutt," he shouted, but his voice carried fear now. Cole didn't take his eyes off him. "Ranger protects children. Maybe you should think about why he thinks Arya needs protecting." The wind howled across the porch. Mara covered her face, sobbing quietly. Arya clung to Elena as if she might vanish if she let go. Cole felt a sinking certainty settle in his gut, a sensation as cold as the snow around him. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Cade took one step forward, rage flickering dangerously in his eyes, and Cole braced himself. Everything was about to break. The wind had begun to ease, but the sky above Frost Hollow still hung heavy with gray, as though the storm lingered in spirit even after its body had broken apart. Cole Harrington stood on his porch, boots planted in fresh snow, eyes locked onto Cade, ready for whatever came next. Ranger remained tense at his side, shoulders stiff, nostrils flaring as he tracked the drunken man's movements with the intensity of a trained protector. Arya clung to Elena in the doorway, trembling, her breath small and fast. Then headlights appeared on the road, cutting through the morning gloom. A sheriff's department SUV crunched to a stop, and out stepped Deputy Silas Reed. Silas was around Cole's age, thick-shouldered and tall, with the calm steadiness of a man who'd been forged by both personal loss and professional pressure. He had sandy blonde hair kept short beneath his beanie, a square jaw dotted with winter stubble, and blue eyes that could go soft as a lake or cold as cracked ice depending on the situation. A faint scar ran down the side of his nose, earned years ago during a domestic call that nearly turned fatal, something he rarely talked about but never forgot. He was also Cole's closest friend in Frost Hollow, a bond formed through unspoken understanding. Cole's years in combat and Silas's years as a small-town deputy had carved similar shadows in both men. "Cole," Silas said, stepping up the snowy stairs. "I heard shouting all the way from the road. What's happening here?" Before Cole could explain, Mara let out a broken gasp and Silas froze. His expression twisted from confusion to shock. "Mara," he whispered. The woman flinched as though struck. Her gaunt face crumbled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Cade," Silas said sharply, turning. "Step back. You smell like you bathed in cheap whiskey. You're not taking a child anywhere in that condition." Cade huffed like a cornered wolf. "This is none of your damn business." "It became my business," Silas said, "the second you showed up dragging a terrified girl to someone else's house." But Silas's attention snapped back to Mara, disbelief still heavy in his eyes. "What are you doing here? Sienna's been looking for you for years." At the mention of his wife, Silas pulled out his radio. "HQ, this is Reed. I need Sienna Reed brought to Harrington Cabin. Urgent family matter." Sienna arrived 10 minutes later, her car skidding into the driveway. She was a woman in her early 30s with a frame built half of nerves and half of quiet will. Her hair, straight, pale blonde, fell from under her knitted hat in hurried strands. Her fair skin flushed red in the cold, and her green eyes, sharp but gentle, held the perpetual worry of someone who cared too easily and suffered for it. Although she lived a stable life with Silas, Sienna carried the weight of a broken family on her shoulders. A wound reopened the moment she saw Mara, standing there in the snow. "Mara?" Sienna choked, stumbling forward. "Oh my God! Mara, where have you been? Why didn't you come home?" Mara collapsed into her sister's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I didn't know how everything got so bad." It was only when Sienna let go that her gaze fell on Arya. She froze. The color drained from her face. She stepped closer slowly, as if afraid the child might vanish if she moved too fast. "Those eyes," she whispered. "Those eyes are just like Giselle's." Cole stiffened at the name. He remembered it vaguely, from whispered conversations between Silas and Elena about Sienna's troubled family, the three sisters who grew up half in love with hope and half in war with the world. Mara was the middle sister, Sienna the eldest, and the youngest. "Giselle," Sienna repeated, voice cracking. "Our baby sister." Mara covered her face, breathing in sharp, painful gulps. I should have told you. I should have said something." Silas took a step closer. "Mara, what happened to Giselle?" The woman shook her head in trembling motions. She left. 4 winters ago, after the baby was born, she was using again. She said she'd get clean in Portland and come back. She never did." "And Arya?" Elena whispered gently, hand on the little girl's back. "Arya is hers, isn't she?" Mara nodded miserably. "She left the baby with me, said she'd be gone a week, then texts, then calls stopped. I didn't have money, I didn't have help. Then Cade came along and said he'd take care of us, but..." Her voice cracked. "But things got worse. He drank, he yelled. Every job I tried to get, Cade ruined it. And then he said Arya needed to bring in money because the world isn't kind to mouths that don't feed themselves." Cole's jaw clenched so hard, it hurt. Cade smirked, as though proud of the cruelty. Sienna pulled Mara close. "Why didn't you come home? We would have helped." Mara collapsed against her. "Because I was ashamed. I failed Giselle. I failed Arya. I failed everyone." Silas rubbed his forehead, looking older than his 36 years. "I'll start the paperwork. We need to confirm everything, but if what you're saying is true, Mara, then legally, Arya was never yours to abandon." Arya whimpered at the word abandon. Elena lowered herself to her knees, holding the girl close. Ranger pressed his head against her small shoulder. "Sweetheart," Elena murmured, "no one is abandoning you now." Silas turned to Cade. "You need to step aside while we sort this out. Threatening a child, dragging her outside in a storm, you're one bad move away from getting arrested." Cade's expression darkened. "She ain't even their kid. She's ours to do what we want." "No," Silas said quietly, voice cold as gravel. "She never was yours." Cade's hands curled into fists. Simmered beneath his skin, no longer the sloppy aggression of a drunk man, but a dangerous calculation. Cole recognized that look instantly. Men like Cade didn't care about children. They cared about control. And Arya was easy to control. Quiet, small, afraid. But now she had people who loved her, which made Cade feel cornered. Cole felt it too late. A shift in the man's posture, a widening of his stance, the twitch of his fingers. "Ranger, stay!" Cole barked, but Ranger had already sensed the threat. Cade lunged, not at Cole, not at Silas, but directly at Arya. Everything erupted. Arya screamed. Elena tried to pull her back, but Cade ripped the child from her arms with a violent yank. Elena stumbled on the icy porch and fell hard, her back striking the wooden step with a sickening thud. Cole shouted her name, but she couldn't answer, breath knocked out of her. Ranger leapt forward, but at that exact moment Cade swung Arya toward the open path and kicked a rusted metal container door into place behind him. It slammed shut between Ranger and the fleeing man with a jarring metallic clang. Ranger threw himself against the door, barking furiously, claws scraping against the metal. "Arya!" Cole roared, voice shredded with panic. Cade didn't look back. He ran into the storm, dragging Arya by the arm as she fought, kicking, sobbing. Mara collapsed screaming after them, her legs too weak to follow. Sienna tried to chase, slipping on the ice. Silas dove around the container, but by the time he reached the corner, Cade had vanished into the whiteout. The world went silent in the most terrifying way. Cole's blood went cold. He had experienced fear before. On battlefields, in burning buildings, in hospitals where he prayed men he fought beside would survive the night. But nothing felt like the terror of seeing that little girl ripped from his world. He felt something twist violently in his chest, a pain so sharp it made him sway. Ranger turned back to him, eyes blazing with frantic desperation. "Cole," Silas said urgently, "we'll find her, we will." But Cole couldn't hear anything over the pounding in his ears. The snow swallowed Cade's tracks faster than any decent chance of rescue, and Arya's cries were already fading into the endless white. The storm pressed down on Frost Hollow like a living thing, an ancient, relentless beast, exhaling icy breath across the land. Snow had fallen for so long the town no longer remembered the color of soil beneath it. Cole Harrington barely felt the cold anymore. 3 days of searching had numbed his skin, his muscles, and everything except the raw terror burning in his chest. Somewhere out there, in this frozen wilderness, Arya was suffering, and he would not stop. Not until she was found. Beside him, Ranger pushed through the drifts tirelessly, his once glossy amber fur now heavy with crusted ice along his flanks. The dog's paws bled from cutting across jagged terrain, but he made no sound, not even a whine. His focus was absolute, eyes fixed ahead, scanning every shadow, every dent in the snow. Ranger understood what was at stake just as deeply as Cole did. Silas Reed walked on the other side of Cole, snow clinging to the thick beard he'd grown over the last days, not out of fashion, but from sleeplessness and stress. His blue eyes, usually calm, were bloodshot from the brutal combination of cold wind, exhaustion, and the fear of failing a child. Sienna followed slightly behind, wrapped in a heavy parka far too large for her frame, her blonde hair tied back hastily. Though she had little physical strength, she possessed something tougher, a determination carved from years of grief over her broken family. She refused to sit at home while her niece might be freezing to death in the woods. Each carried torches of thick pine soaked in kerosene, the flames wild and tall like desperate prayers against the swallowing dark. Cole's breath came in harsh clouds. "Nothing yet?" Silas shook his head. "Not a trace. Footprints disappear faster than we can follow them." Ranger suddenly halted, nose twitching, his ears perked. A sharp bark split the night. Cole tensed. "He's got something." Ranger took off, bounding through the trees, his body cutting through the storm like a blade. Cole sprinted after him, feeling life surge back into his frozen limbs. "Ranger, slow down," he shouted. But the dog did not listen, because he had found something. Ahead, faint lights flickered through the swirling snow, small fires glowing inside an abandoned cluster of shipping containers. Frost Hollow's homeless population sometimes sheltered there during harsh winters, and only the cruelest storms like this, drove the most desperate toward those metal coffins of cold. Ranger barked sharply, scratching at the door of a dented container. Silas caught up, breathing hard. "This is it. It has to be." Cole didn't hesitate. He slammed the metal latch upward, tearing it loose with a strength fueled by fear rather than muscle. The door creaked open, spilling dim orange firelight into the night. The sight inside made Cole's heart clench. Arya sat curled in a corner, shivering violently beneath a torn blanket, her tiny body nearly buried in the fabric but not enough to hide the bluish tone of her lips. Her dark hair was tangled with frost, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. She looked like a fragile, half-melted snow sculpture instead of a child. "Mama Elena," she murmured weakly, barely conscious. Cole dropped to his knees beside her, wrapping her in his arms. The moment his warm coat engulfed her, she whimpered and clutched at him, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. "Arya, sweetheart, I've got you," he whispered, voice breaking. "Uncle Cole's here." "I'm here." Ranger pressed against her side, whining softly, licking her hand as if trying to infuse warmth back into her skin. But then Cole noticed the other figure on the ground, Mara. She lay crumpled near a fading fire, her face flushed an unnatural red, sweat beading on her forehead. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, every inhale a painful gasp. Silas crouched beside her. "She's burning up. Fever. She must have stayed to keep Arya warm." Sienna knelt next to her sister, tears filling her eyes. "Mara, why didn't you come home? Why didn't you get help?" Mara's cracked lips trembled. "I tried to leave him, but he said he'd hurt her if I did." She coughed violently. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to get this bad." Cole squeezed Arya gently. "Where's Cade?" As if summoned, a scraping sound came from the far corner of the container. Cade was sitting on an overturned crate, hunched over a pile of crumpled bills, money Arya had been forced to beg for at the Frost Hollow Christmas fair. His eyes were wild, pupils blown, face gaunt with paranoia. He clutched the money like it was air. When he noticed the intruders, his expression twisted into that of a cornered predator. "You're not taking her," he barked. "She brings in money. She owes me. Silas stood tall, pulling a folder of documents from his coat. His voice cut like ice. "You stole $10,000 of accident compensation that belonged to Arya's real father. Not gambling debts, theft, fraud, child endangerment. I have the bank records. You're done, Cade." Cade's face paled under the dirt. "Lies," he spat. "All lies." But even he didn't sound convinced. Mara's voice choked out. "He took everything. Everything Giselle saved, he used me, used Arya. I was just too scared to leave." "You think anyone's going to believe you, good people?" Cade snarled, stepping closer with jerky movements. "In a small town like this, rumors spread faster than snowstorms. I'll tell them Cole kidnapped her. I'll tell them he stole her to play hero. They'll eat it up." Cole rose slowly to his feet, placing Arya gently into Sienna's arms. "Cade," he said quietly, "don't do anything you can't take back." But Cade had already reached the end of his sanity. With a furious scream, he lunged, snatching Arya from Sienna's arms before Silas or Cole could react. She cried out in pain as his fingers dug into her side. Ranger erupted into a snarl that shook the container walls. His amber fur bristled and he crouched, ready to leap. "Back off!" Cade roared, clutching Arya like a shield. "I swear I'll ruin every single one of you." "Cade, please!" Mara sobbed, dragging herself upright. "Let her go. She's just a child. She's your niece, Giselle's daughter." But Cade was beyond reason. His eyes burned with rage, fear, and desperation. "Shut up!" he screamed, and then he shoved Arya away from him with full strength. The little girl's small body slammed into the metal wall with a sickening thud. Her head struck the cold steel, and she crumpled instantly, unconscious, limp as a fallen doll. "Mara!" Sienna screamed. "Arya!" Elena's voice echoed in Cole's memory, though she wasn't there. Cole surged forward, but Cade darted out of the container, disappearing into the forest of snow-laden pines. "Silas, go!" Cole thundered. Silas sprinted after the fleeing man, torchlight swinging wildly between trees, but within seconds, Cade vanished into the blizzard. Ranger let out a howl of fury, but Cole had already dropped beside Arya, gathering her small, cold body into his arms. Her breathing was shallow, almost inaudible. Blood stained her hairline. Her skin was frighteningly pale beneath the flickering firelight. "No," Cole breathed, voice cracking. "No, no, no. Arya, sweetheart, stay with me." Ranger pressed close, whining nonstop, his cold nose nudging her cheek as if begging her to wake. Mara collapsed into sobs. "It's my fault, all of it. I led him to her. I let him hurt her." Sienna held her tightly, weeping silently. "Not anymore. We'll protect her now, I swear." Cole didn't waste another second. "Silas!" he shouted toward the trees. "Forget him! Get the truck!" Sienna wrapped Arya in every blanket she could find. Cole carried the child out into the storm, Ranger following so close their footsteps merged into one. Snowflakes clung to Arya's eyelashes. Her tiny hand dangled from the blanket, unmoving. Cole clutched her tighter, feeling his own heartbeat fracture. As Silas's truck roared to life behind them, Cole whispered into the night, "You're going to make it. I won't lose you. I won't." Ranger barked once, sharp, determined, then sprinted ahead, clearing the way through the drifts. And together, with Arya slipping in and out of consciousness against Cole's chest, they tore through the blizzard toward Frost Hollow Hospital. The longest night the town had ever known had only just begun. The storm had finally broken. Dawn stretched pale gold over Frost Hollow as if the sky itself had been holding its breath through the entire night. Cole Harrington burst through the double doors of Frost Hollow Hospital, Rangers sprinting beside him, snow dripping from his coat like thawing tears. In his arms, small and terrifyingly still, lay Arya. Her weight was feather-light, her breath shallow as a whisper. Every step Cole took pounded with one desperate thought: don't let her die. Not now, not after everything. Nurses rushed in as soon as Cole shouted for help. Dr. Meredith Hale, the hospital's lead pediatrician, appeared instantly. She was a woman in her late 40s, tall and wiry, with ash-brown hair tied into a severe bun and eyes that had seen enough winters and enough suffering to never waste a second. Her face held both authority and weariness, framed by faint lines near her mouth that told of years spent staying late, long after her shift ended, for children who needed her. Her voice was crisp yet gentle as she signaled for a gurney. "Hypothermia, possible cranial trauma. Get her to room 3, she ordered, barely glancing at Cole before focusing fully on the child in his arms. Cole released Arya only when the gurney arrived, and even then his fingers hesitated, as if his body couldn't accept letting her go again. Ranger whimpered, pacing frantically as Arya disappeared behind the swinging doors of the emergency hallway. Elena arrived moments later, breathless, cheeks still wet with tears from when Silas had called her. She wore her winter coat thrown hastily over her pajamas, her chestnut hair disheveled, face pale with worry. She clung to Cole's arm. "Is she—" "They're working on her," he said, barely able to steady his voice. Silas hurried in soon after, snow clinging to his uniform, his face drawn with exhaustion and fury. Sienna arrived behind him, supporting Mara, who was feverish, trembling, and nearly unable to stand. A nurse rushed Mara to a separate room, leaving behind only Sienna's choked sobs. Time turned strange inside hospital walls, both painfully slow and brutally fast. Dr. Hale returned after roughly an hour, her face stern yet controlled. "She's stable. The concussion is mild. The hypothermia is moderate but treatable. She woke once but fell asleep again. That's normal with exhaustion and cold exposure." Cole's knees nearly gave out. Elena covered her mouth, silently weeping into her hands. Ranger pressed his head against Cole's thigh, sensing the emotional release. "But there is something else," Dr. Hale added, looking toward Silas. "We completed an emergency blood panel and cross-referenced it with DNA markers on record. The results show she is not genetically related to Mara Lewis." Silas nodded grimly. So it's true. Giselle was the mother. Before anyone could respond, the automatic hospital doors slid open, letting in a gust of cold air and a woman. She moved carefully, clutching something in her gloved hands. She couldn't have been more than 28, with wavy chestnut hair falling loosely over her shoulders, cheeks scattered with freckles despite the winter pallor. Her eyes, large, bright green, were unmistakably familiar. The same shape, the same color, the same quiet sorrow that lived in Arya's gaze. Her clothes were simple but clean. A faded denim jacket layered over a thick gray sweater, jeans worn at the knees, boots with frayed laces. She looked tired, not the exhaustion of the homeless or the abused, but the exhaustion of someone who had fought long and hard against her own demons. She stepped forward, voice quivering. "Silas Reed?" Silas turned, startled. "Yes, you are." The woman swallowed hard. "I'm Giselle Lewis." She raised the handmade stuffed bear in her hands, a small brown teddy with crooked stitches in one ear slightly larger than the other, Arya's old toy. "I made this for my daughter." A heavy silence fell. Elena whispered first. "You're her mother?" Giselle nodded, tears filling her eyes. I've been clean for 3 years. I work at a diner in Clover Ridge now. I saved every dollar I could. I've been watching Arya from afar since autumn. I saw her at the snowmelt market. I saw Mara take care of her. I saw how scared she looked sometimes. Her voice cracked. But I was terrified I'd fail again. Terrified I wasn't worthy of being her mother. Her grief was raw, but her resolve was steady. Dr. Hale gently gestured toward the hallway. She's stable enough for visitors. You may see her, but please, one at a time. Cole stepped forward. Let Giselle go first. Giselle hesitated. Are you sure? After everything she's been through, she might not. She deserves to know her mother, Cole said. Inside the small recovery room, Arya lay on a cot wrapped in warm blankets, a faint pink returning to her cheeks. Ranger curled beneath the foot of her bed, refusing to leave. His ears perked as Giselle entered, but sensing her scent, faint lavender, wool, and something deeper that felt like memory, he relaxed. Giselle approached slowly, hands trembling. Arya. The little girl stirred, eyelashes fluttering. When she opened her eyes, they locked onto Giselle's face. A long moment passed, quiet, fragile, and then Arya whispered, You look like me. Giselle broke into silent tears. I'm your mommy, she choked out. And I never stopped loving you, not even when I was broken. Arya studied her, then reached out a small hand. Giselle clasped it instantly, pressing it to her cheek. Silas, Cole, Sienna, and Elena soon joined them in the hallway. Mara, recovering in her room, asked for Arya every few minutes, desperate to know if she was safe. Later, under the guidance of child therapist Dr. Lowry, a tall, soft-spoken man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and a calming presence, they formed a plan for Arya's future. Dr. Lowry had spent years handling sensitive custody cases, and his voice carried the gentle authority of someone who understood trauma deeply. His recommendation was clear. Arya needs stability, love, and consistency. Giselle is the legal mother, but the child has bonded with Cole and Elena. The best situation for her mental and emotional development is dual stability. Thus, the final arrangement took shape. Legal custody, Giselle primary weekday care, Cole and Elena at their stable home. Weekends, with Giselle to build a healthy mother-child relationship. Mara, given supervised visitation and enrolled into trauma counseling. Silas, opened a secure savings account using the recovered compensation money. Ranger, unofficial emotional support guardian of Arya Winter, eased its grip on Frost Hollow. Snow melted into glittering streams that carved tiny rivers through the woods. By early March, the town prepared for its annual Snowmelt Festival, a celebration of surviving the harshest season. On the day of the festival, Arya, now 5, stood on a small wooden stage in a white dress Elena had sewn for her. Her hair was combed neatly, held by a tiny ribbon Giselle gifted her. Her cheeks glowed in the crisp spring air. She held a small paper with trembling hands and began to read into the microphone, her voice soft but clear enough to silence the crowd. Family is who holds my hand in the snowstorm, she said. Family is who finds me even when the snow hides the path. Family is who never leaves me behind. The audience held their breath. Cole lifted Ranger onto his hip so Arya could see them in the crowd. Elena stood beside him, her hand interlocked with his. Giselle and Mara held hands too, tears shining in their eyes as they watched the little girl who stitched them all back together. Arya finished with a smile so bright it melted the last bits of frost clinging to the trees. For the first time in her life, she wasn't lost in winter. She had a home, a real one, a family, an unexpected one, and a future, finally her own. In the end, Arya's story reminds us that even in the coldest winters of our lives, God can place a small light in our path to guide us home. Sometimes His miracles arrive quietly, in the form of a kind stranger, a loyal dog, a family we never expected, or the courage to begin again. If you are going through a storm right now, hold on. The same God who carried Arya through the snow can carry you through whatever you're facing today. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need hope. Leave a comment to tell us your thoughts and subscribe to our channel so these messages of compassion can reach even more people. May God bless you, protect you, and warm your life with His grace today and always.